What's good, y'all? It's your boy Mixtape Moth. Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, as all that is greatly appreciated. But today, I'm gonna hit y'all with my thoughts on this new project from Meek Mill and Rick Ross entitled "Too Good to Be True." Two mainstream rap giants from the same label have decided after all these years to do a collab album together. Now, both Rick Ross and Meek Mill have not released individual projects since 2021, neither of which stood out to me, but I'd have to say the Rick Ross album was a little better than the Meek. Yeah, Meek Mill's Expensive Pain, it was not a good album, and it was a step down from his very solid Championships from 2020. But getting right into this new project, Too Good to Be True. Truthfully, I had zero expectations going into this album. I wasn't excited for this release. You know, it's not a collaboration that I had asked for, but I had at least hoped that two artists of this caliber were going to be able to assemble a moderately good project with some bangers. Now, this contains 17 tracks lasting approximately an hour. But with that being said, let me go ahead and just hit y'all with this track by track breakdown. The opener, Shaq and Kobe, it's not a bad way to set this off. I like the crisp drums and darker atmospheric synths, and both Ross and Meek sounded pretty good, and the energy is there. So as a whole, I don't really have any complaints with how they opened the album. Track 2, Star Island, has some trippy synth chords and hi-hats courtesy of ATL Jacob. Now, production-wise, it is a banger, but it's still not a standout. And that's mainly because Meek is not talking about much at all. He's bragging about the amount of women that he's got, which is a reoccurring theme for him on this album. Now, the Ross verse wasn't crazy, but it was better than Meek's. So yeah, this song was just okay. Track 3, Go to Hell, actually has a fantastic beat from Cool and Dre. We are getting that Tears for Fears sample that gives the track that up-tempo, cocaine 80s feel. Meek does have a decent line on a corner of £4, $2 and some now or laters. I'm a real life survivor. Them people was trying to fade us. But the rest of his performance takes a nosedive as he feels like compelled to give us cringy sex bars. And he also felt the need to tell us that he has lunch with Tom Brady, who discusses his girl problems. Yeah, it's just info I didn't really need to know, and it's like total opposite of like alpha male energy. Following this is 800 Carats, which has a spooky trap-like beat from ATL Jacob. Meek once again is giving us some model and bad bitches talk, mixed in with the occasional threat of violence. Overall, it's a solid beat with decent energy, but these two aren't saying much. Next is Dead Last with Fab and Vori, and it's backed by some mellow, somber pianos. Now, as most of y'all know, I'm not a big auto-tune guy, but I did feel Vori actually killed this hook. And it sounded like we were getting just a slight amount of introspection here, but not much. And it was good to hear Fab. But as decent as his verse was, it was still filled with some cliche Instagram like post lines. But as a whole, I'd say this was one of the highlights from the album. Track 6, They Don't Really Love You, sounds like it could have been left over from 2016. The auto-tune hook from Meek Mill just screams that era, and that's not necessarily a good thing. While I did not find Rick Ross's verses to be too bad, I just couldn't get into this song. The following, Million Dollar Trap, is a little better. I like the nocturnal but bouncy ATL Jacob beat. The verse from Meek is cringy, but at least his voice is on point and his flow fits the beat. Yeah, for what it is, it's not a bad banger. The same could be said for the subsequent song, Grandiose. We have this psychedelic trap instrumental courtesy of Murder Beats that was solid. And an auto-tune hook from Vori that fits the strip club-like vibes of this record. So all things considered, this wasn't terrible. But the following, Above the Law, it was a mess. First off, no one was asking for DJ Khaled to remake the classic shiznit beat from Snoop and Dre. Like, no one asked for that shit. Yeah, I mean, I feel there's just certain songs that shouldn't be touched, especially if DJ Khaled is the one doing the touching. So yeah, I was definitely annoyed that this was on the album, mainly because it was just a tacky remix. Afterwards, we do get a high point with the song Fine Lines, which features Wale and The Dream, and this is backed by some slower, luxurious pianos and overall elegant, made-back music type beat. The performance from Wale was solid, and I think The Dream's angelic vocals were a nice touch. Then track 11, Gold Medals with Jeremiah, is like your standard cookie cutter R&B like record. It's not bad, but pretty run of the mill. The next song, Iconic, it had potential given the soul sample, which was pretty dope. I've heard it before, but it was a spectacular one. But unfortunately, it was weakened by some beyond cringy sex bars from Meek and a mid-Ross verse. Yeah, this definitely could have sounded much better, given the production. And I feel slightly similar about the following track, Lyrical Easy. Now, given this piercing piano sample, which Cormega used on Dead Man Walking from way back when, but I was expecting these two to do some lyrical spazzing. So while Meek and Ross's verses were not atrocious, I still feel they were punching below their weight here. Track 14, Pillow Talk, is your standard Take Keith slapper. The energy is pretty solid and the flows were intact, and I feel Ross actually slid on his verse. This is followed up by Millionaire Row featuring French, and it's a formulaic Maybach music banger. I suppose the sample at the beginning was catchy, but the song was forgettable overall. The second to last song, In Love with the Money with Future, is an example of a dated sounding track that actually sounds good. The beat from Southside and the hook from Future will likely transport you back to 2016, but in a good way this time. And thankfully, Meek wasn't on it to ruin the track. Then this project wraps up with this Shaq and Kobe remix. The verses from Ross and Meek were the same, but this contains features from Shaquille O'Neal and Dame Dollar, two NBA stars getting their bars off. And I gotta say, both Shaq and Dame Dollar had stronger verses than Meek Mill did on this album. So overall, I'm gonna give this project a rating of 2.5 mics. To be fair, there were some aggressive bangers and a couple decent slower songs that I would revisit. And the production was mostly solid throughout. But this project was plagued with cringy hooks and very shallow, uninspiring subject matter. And let me be clear, I'm not looking for anything crazy deep for Meek and Ross. That's not the case. But lyrically, they are much more capable than what they gave on this project, in my opinion. Now, all things considered, Rick Ross's performance on this album was not as bad as Meek. And honestly, this should have just been a Rick Ross solo project, and it likely would have elicited slightly better results. But if you can get past the mid performances, the features weren't bad, and there were enough bangers to keep this project from being completely terrible. But at the end of the day, I think a much more suitable title for this album should have been Too Mid to Be Good. My favorite tracks include Go to Hell, Dead Last, $1 Million Trap, Fine Lines, and the Shaq and Kobe remix. But let me know your thoughts on this album in the comment section. It's your boy Mixtape Muff. I'm signing out. But as always, is peace and blessings. Rick Ross, Meek Mill, Too Good to Be True, 1.